Let's talk about power systems today.
Let's get started. I'm Hunter with Swamp Fox Overland.
My name's Rich with Swamp Fox Overland.
The Shanty Chef Trophy. We're overlanding.
We are Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor.
When we talk about overlanding, we like to go places where there is no power, right? So what do? You bring your power with you. Oftentimes that's in a Bluetti power bank, or in my case, a Lashitty power bank. Or you build a system in the truck that works, that stays semi-permanent, right? And so I've always been a big fan of batteries. Being a ham radio operator, I've always wanted to make sure that I understood how to harness power and then how to make it renewable or restorable, right? How do you do that without doing solar initially? Enter the Orion-TR from Victron Energy. If you'll remember, I used to have an auxiliary battery bank in Luna, my 2017 Chevy Colorado. And when we decided to get the Gladiator, we made a change and decided, okay, well now we get to do it bigger and badder. Nothing wrong with the Renogy DC to DC charger. She did what she was supposed to. But this one is just a smidge more robust. And so this comes complete with app capability, but it connects to Android Auto directly on your screen in the truck. And that makes it super easy to monitor without having to fiddle with your phone or mess with it while you're driving. It pops right up on your screen, and then you're immediately monitoring what's happening with your battery and your charger. How powerful is that? What is a DC to DC charger? So a DC to DC charger is essentially an apparatus that hooks up to your main battery system in the truck, the charging battery, plus the alternator, right? And so what you're doing is you're recharging using the power that is being generated from your vehicle's alternator. In a regular vehicle system, you've got the main battery or the starter battery that manages all of the electronics in the truck, right? And then that is recharged by the alternator or a generator, right, to recharge that battery. Well, what happens when you add a second auxiliary battery system? We've got a battery system here in the bed of the truck that is hooked up to this DC to DC charger. So essentially you're running leads from the front to the back of the truck, and then you're hooking it up to this DC to DC charger, and then this DC to DC charger charges the battery that's in the back of the truck. And then anything auxiliary, notice the word, or anything that is ancillary or secondary can be hooked up to that. That can be lights that you don't want to run off the starter battery. That can be this refrigerator that we run, the Set Power AJ40. We like to keep things cool on the trail, and we don't want to have to manage an ice chest. So this refrigerator runs perpetually. Even when I go out to softball on the weekends, I drink beer out of this thing. So super cool. Let's take a look at what this actually looks like.
Our battery system features a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. This is connected to a Victron Energy Orion-TR Smart 12 DC to DC charger. The lead is protected by a 40 amp Bojack ANL Fuse hooked up to 4 gauge leads, then routed along the frame rail of the truck down a main wiring harness, then connected to the starter battery of the truck.
One of the biggest criticisms about a DC to DC charger is how does it cut off and protect the starter battery when the car cuts off? What detects that? Normally, you have a fuse connection. So you connect this DC to DC charger to a fuse connection, right? Whether that's via a fuse wire tap that goes into the main fuse box. And what that's supposed to do is very simple. Kind of like your light system in the truck. If the truck is off, oftentimes you won't be able to turn on your headlights and drain your battery, right? And so that's kind of nice. One thing that you don't want to do with an auxiliary battery system, especially when the charger is drawing power away from the main starter battery, is you want it to cut off when the alternator is not running, aka when the alternator is not generating additional power, so that you're not stuck in a situation where your battery is just dead and then you can't start your battery in the middle of the wilderness. We don't want that to happen. So what happens is this DC to DC charger senses when the truck is running. How easy is it to hook up to a fuse tap? It's not hard. And that's the issue that I had with the Renogy. Instead of a fuse tap, this is still hooked up to the leads and it's still sensing the voltage from the battery. But on the Victron Connect app, you can go in and essentially manage all of the different parameters that the Victron DC to DC charger manages. So you go in and you set a certain voltage that says the truck is off. And if the voltage drops below, the Victron just cuts off. So I have it set for 12.8 volts. And if it drops below 12.8 volts for more than 60 seconds, the charger cuts off. And that's a super cool feature because now I don't have to figure out where to run another wire. So the Victron Energy Orion-TR is simply hooked up by two leads, a positive and a negative. And that's it. I initially wanted to go with a combo unit. Victron doesn't make a combo unit, but they're modular. What I mean by a combo unit is that I have the 30 amp DC to DC charger. I also, on my last truck, ran a solar controller. So the solar panels that were on top of the truck, they also charge. And so one of my biggest hiccups is I want to make sure I have a system that works independently. So I want the DC to DC charger work by itself. I want the solar stuff to work by themselves. And the combo units had this weird little quirk that if the DC to DC charger is running, it either A, would cut off solar charging altogether, or B, it would limit solar charging to a certain amperage. And while that's something that is a cool little protection, I want them both to run and I want it to run how I want it to. I know enough about power to where all of that charging capability is going to be sized correctly, and we're not just going to blow up the battery system or blow up the truck. Victron assumes that you know what you're doing when you put this power system together. So eventually, I will take another Victron solar controller and mount that as well and connect it to the battery. And then I will have two apparatuses that work independently, but work exactly how I want it. And with the Victron Connect app, you can modify and change and control all of the parameters. Renogy had a lot of block-offs, and that's my problem. I'm running 100 amp hours here in the bed. So essentially, 100 amp hours means that it can run 100 amps for 1 hour. So essentially, if you're running a 12 volt system, 12 volts times 100 amps equals the wattage. So we're running about 1200 watt hours, right? A lot of times you're going to see a lot of your things, a lot of your electrical needed apparatuses say, well, watt hours. Radio operators talk a lot in amp hours. So that's the conversion. You should see it on the screen. One of the biggest things for me is that the Victron system was made by the Dutch, right? The Dutch do really well with electronics. And not saying that the Chinese don't. The Renogy is a Chinese company. But there's just a certain attention to detail that makes a lot more sense and gives you a lot more control. Just little quirks would drive me nuts about the Renogy. Like, I felt like I had to restart the app all the time because it would run live for a certain amount of time and then it would just conk out. But if you refreshed it on your phone, it would show up, right? I hate that. I also hated that Renogy did not have an app for CarPlay or Android Auto. And that was a huge piece. Plus, I already had a really, really great experience with the Victron solar controller. I was really, really excited to have things that worked in conjunction, because on the Victron Connect app, you will see all of the different apparatuses that you're running. So the DC to DC charger would show up and you would see how that's working. And then the Victron Smart Solar apparatus would show, and that's showing. And it's all on the same screen. And so it makes monitoring on the go super duper easy. So some of y'all are familiar with this Android Auto screen. Over here, you click on the apps, scroll up, Victron Connect, and now boom. So we're sitting at 13.61 volts. And then you can dig in a little deeper. 13.68 volts is your input, and then out to the battery it's 13.63 volts, so it's charging. And then it also shows you what state it's in. So you've got bulk, which is up to about 80 to 85% of the battery, and then absorption is when you get to about 14.2 volts and it's mostly charged, so it's just essentially topping off the battery. And then after that, you've got float charge when it's fully charged. And that's it. That's how simple it is. Easy. 2 wires in, 2 wires out to the battery, wires to whatever it needs to go to, or even if you have a bus bar to connect all of your electrical things to. They also make DC control boxes that make it simple, and you can charge your phones or whatever you want to. So many different options. But bottom line, whenever the truck's on, you're charging that battery. And that's how you build a sustainable power system. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful, and honestly, I'd be happy to answer any questions. But other than that, I appreciate it. Thank you always for supporting Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor. Take good care. I guess now we got to go somewhere.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode. If you like what we're doing out here, please be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell to be reminded that we're out here. And as always, we are Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor. Until next time.